Was it a beautiful morning? Was it a beautiful day? Have you ever wanted to sing like there's no one listening? You ever want to dance like there's no one looking? You want to work like you don't need the money? Or love like you've never been heard? Well, let's do one of them. And if I can sing, anybody can sing. Will you humor the old man? I'll do one line and then you'll know the song. There's a method to my madness. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going my way. Thank you. You know, I'm one of those guys on an airplane, if you're reading a book and I'm sitting across the aisle from you, and I think it's interesting, I'm going to probably intrude on your piece. And I was on an airplane years ago, and there was a man sitting across the aisle and fit the MO perfectly, and he was reading a book in a different language other than English, and I really had a restless curiosity around what he was reading. So I finally asked him, and make a long story short, he was a visiting professor, and his research area was longevity, and he had interviewed elders from the four directions, down under, all over, circumpolar region, all 7 continents. And so I asked him, I said, well, what did you learn? And he said, well, it was pretty interesting, is that people lived to be 105, 110 years old, and some would smoke, some didn't smoke, didn't drink, believe in God, didn't believe in God, lived by the equator, lived up north. And I said, well, what was something that they all held in common? And he said, it was interesting. They all hummed, sang, and whistled, and had a great sense of humor. So if it's good enough for the elders of this planet, it's good enough for the bird people, it's good enough for those of you that do the work of justice. In fact, there was a lady by the name of Angelus Arian, and she said one time, she said, what was the beginning of soul loss? And she said there were 4 questions that she would ask, and that would tell you the beginning of soul loss. And it's something I want to talk about tonight. And she said, when did you stop becoming enchanted by storytelling? When did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing? And when did you start becoming uncomfortable with silence? And the answer to those 4 questions will tell you the beginning of soul loss. Oren Lyons, the faith keeper for the Okanagan Nation, once said that life will go on as long as there is someone to sing, dance, tell stories, and to listen. Well, we have sang, and I will be telling a few stories this evening. We will save the dancing and the silence for another time, okay? Composition of place, I want to do this right now. Humor me. I want to, one thing Tony, I don't think he told me is how long I could talk. And you need to know that one of my fondest memories when I was a full-time professor, before I lost IQ points, became a full-time administrator, was teaching 3-hour classes. I won't keep you that long, though. But I used to like 75-minute classes as well. Feel your heart right now. Just put your hand like you did earlier, pledge allegiance to the flag. Feel your heart. Pause. Feel your heartbeat. Are you alive? Yes. Is that good news? Yes. Say I'm alive. Alive. Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Look at your thumb. Realize this, that there are 7.4 billion humanoids speaking over 6,000 languages, and no one on this third stone from the sun has the fingerprint that you are looking at. Are you unique? Yes. Say I'm unique. I'm unique. Look to your left. Look to your right. Look in front of you. Look behind you. Are you surrounded by beauty? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Tell at least 2 people, look at them in a non-snagging way and say, you are beautiful. You are beautiful. Okay, so we have established that you're alive, that you're unique, and that you're surrounded by beauty. Back in the day of Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, the first universities and colleges were in where? Where were they located? Botanical gardens. So the pursuit of truth always was resident in great beauty, uniqueness, and aliveness. But here's what I got to find out from you right now. Will the consensus reality in this room endorse the idea of being poetic tonight for and with each other? Can we go poetic? That's a real question. Across time and space, cultures through history, through written form or oral tradition, the role of the poet has been and continues to be threefold. To confront the difficult and complex issues of the time, to generate great dialogue, and to do what we're doing tonight is to celebrate the entire process of the creative impulse to confront and discern. Now here's a presupposition for you right now. If one buys in to the notion that we're born in the image and likeness of God, she, he, or it, or other or them, we call them creators, so that makes us a chip off the old block. Therefore, this makes us creative, being creative in what William Blake once called the divine imagination. So where are we going with our power of thought in our pursuit for equality and social justice for the human race as it continues this effort? Where will we walk the talk of this affirmation that this effort is enduring, that it continues as we negotiate the landscape from the known to the unknown? This is what I want to think out loud with you about this evening. The two key elements of tonight's thematic focus are pursuit and it continues. Indeed, it is a marathon as we go from the known to the unknown. How can we avoid burnout? How do we battle social justice fatigue? By bathing in the waters of our resilience. So, I want to talk about that journey a bit with passport in hand. How many of you have a passport? Raise your hand. How many of you use that passport? I know my brother Joe Casella, he's got more pages in that passport than, I don't know what, probably the telephone book. Sucker's that thick, huh? But here it is. And I'm distilling it down, and in less than a month I'll be going to Zambia, and I'm going to be hearing these three questions. But I think these questions are very, very insightful around going from the known to the unknown, although sometimes what we see in the political landscape in this country today seems like Groundhog's Day. We have seen this before. And sometimes we end up taking one step forward and two steps back, but we'll get to that later. Here's the deal. These are the questions that the customs agent, that the immigration officer asks you. Who are you? Which is an identity query. Where are you going is about purpose and destiny. And do you have anything to declare? Which is about values. Now, I don't know about you, but I think those are some pretty heavy, deep, and real questions. Don't you? I mean, you would have wind in your sail and ride in your glide if you had an impeccably clear response to those three questions every day that you wake up. Who are you? Where are you going? And do you have anything to declare? Well, I'm going to act as a mirror and reflect back to you. So who are you? Who are we? First question. We are the miner's canary. We are the ones who detect, challenge, and eliminate toxic threats to the claim that human difference in balanced partnership with freedom and responsibility is the soul of an authentic multicultural democracy, the spiritual DNA of healthy human systems on this planet. A dear friend of mine, some of you might have known him from years ago, Bill Nigmeyer, who has long since joined the ancestors, used to often remind me of this. He said, if we have a Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, we should have a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. Who are we? We are the salmon swimming upstream, going against the current, speaking truth to the face of power, are we not? I first heard this story about truth in relationship to the lie in 2003 when a lady by the name of Tanya Petford-Waite spoke at the Community Congress on Race Relations hosted by Gonzaga University. And the story went like this. The truth and the lie went down to the river to take a swim. It was a hot, hot day. It was a beautiful day, almost like today, the hint of spring, but it was the summer. It was hot. So they decided to go swimming in this river. So they both went into the water. And then the truth went down into the water for a long time, and lie came back up and got out of the water and went over and put truth's clothes on, and then went into the village dressed up like the truth and walked around the marketplace, and everybody thought it was the truth because the lie was dressed up like the truth. Well, later, the truth comes up, looks around, and lie's not around. Looks and it finds out no clothes. Doesn't know what to do, pretty uncomfortable, but decides to brave it anyway and go into town as the naked truth. And of course, everybody did not want to look at the naked truth. Everybody was looking at the lie, thinking, well, because the lie looked like the truth, right? The naked truth. James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, and nothing can be changed until it is faced. Who are you? You are the ones who have the courage, like buffalo, to face the storm. You know that buffalo is one of the few animals on the planet. When there's a storm coming, the buffalo sees the storm and goes through the storm. Everybody else, all four other leggeds and the winged and the two-leggeds, everybody goes the opposite direction. But guess what? If you go to the opposite direction, the storm is always behind you, right? Buffalo knows if you go through the storm, you're going that way, the storm's going this way. The courage of the buffalo. As I sit here and stand here with you, we know this works. Because at Gonzaga University right now, Rowan Farrow is talking. He's the man that was instrumental in the Me Too movement as an example of speaking truth to the face of power. So where are we going? Make an okay sign like this. Give me this. Do this. Go like this. Look at that. Do you see that? Do you see that circle? You see that hole? Okay. You make an okay like this. Come on now, brother. You can do this. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to put your head through that hole. I want you to literally poke your head through that hole. Can you do that? How do you do that? How can you do that? Poke your head through that hole. How can you do that? Like this. Like this. Where are we going? Where we are going is we are going to specialize in the impossible. And many times we have to be countercultural and counterintuitive because you've heard this before. If you do the same thing and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. As human rights activists, we have to think differently about our work, particularly in this political context that we find ourselves in. Like Houston Smith once said, reason is too short of a ladder to reach the lofty heights of truth. I will use the navigational acumen of the merchant marines called deducted reckoning to briefly reflect upon three primary reference points on this marathon journey. First, I want to, is there any merchant marines in the room? No? I had an elder friend one time. He was from the McCall tribe on the West Coast, and he was a merchant marine. Real quick, can I take the time on this one? This is kind of interesting. Okay, so you don't know where you are. You have no technology, no computers. You have no cell phones, no global position device. Okay, so check this out. This is cool. For thousands of years, this is how people circumnavigated the planet. Deducted reckoning is making a big triangle initially. So the 3 points are where you are, the horizon, which is the beautiful, perfect line, sacred geometry, where the sky and the ocean. Have you ever been to the Great Surround, on an island? You can see how the water and the sky come together and make a perfect line. So that's the second point. And then a star. In this case, his name was Emmett Oliver. I don't know if some of you used to know him. He was a pretty well-known elder in Indian country back in the day. And he said that his favorite star was Capella. So he could always find Capella. He knew where the horizon was and randomly knew where he was standing, right? So that is the triangle, deducted reckoning. So the deal is you find more reference points, more stars, and you create a smaller triangle with greater precision around where you've been, where you are, and where you're going to go. That's a simplification. So here are the 3 points. in this journey as we continue our work with equality and human rights. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of conditions and context for our pursuit in the continuing. I want to talk about the challenge and the opportunity. So first, conditions, challenge, and opportunity. But let me pause here and say this. I was telling my wife driving here, I said, you know what today is? 420, okay, well, I know it's illegal in Washington State, I get it, okay. But, oh. 129 years ago, Adolf Hitler was born. Today is his birthday. Little did he know, and anyone that resonates with his message of hate, that we have the courage to face the naked truth. Do I hear an amen to that? Amen. We nurture and nourish the commitment to specialize in the impossible. Isn't that right? Yeah. Third question. Do you remember what we're doing right now? Remember the passport? We're still that. Third question. Do we have anything to declare? This is what I want to declare. Human difference, equality, equity, inclusion, social justice is sacred in the spirit of Ken Hoffman when he portrays sacred as shared vulnerability and that kindness is the practical face of the sacred. So let's move right into, I don't have much, you know what, I better watch the time, huh? I'm going to take my watch right here off. What time did I start? Okay, you're cool. Okay, all right. So let's start with the conditions for our pursuit. In 1987, first of all, I used to work for the Coeur d'Alene tribe before Gonzaga. 30 years ago, I was with the Coeur d'Alene tribe. I worked there. Ernie Stensgaard was my boss. Is Ernie here tonight? He's not here tonight. Okay. Well, anyway, then I got seduced by the Jesuits. That's a story unto itself. But boy, I tell you, they can tell stories. And we weren't in the confessional either, So when I left the Coeur d'Alenes and I came to Gonzaga, I used to go up to Alaska a lot, and I would go up there were 44 school districts in the state of Alaska. I've been to every one of them at least once. I was really doing a lot of consulting up there. And what was interesting to me is when I'd go up to the North Slope, up to Barrow, Alaska, and to Kotzebue, then I was noticing that the permafrost was starting to get really squishy. Things from the earlier years I went until the later years. And so it got me interested in this idea of how conditions change, that change climate, that changes culture. And in fact, I'm going to teach a class in Zambia, what I call Introduction to Global Indigenous Studies, basically looking at the power of people in relationship to place and the environment. And what I realized is that obviously this was 30 years ago, 31 years ago, the Earth was warming up and it was changing the conditions in the North Slope of Alaska to a point where it was changing the climate, which then changes the culture. The people have to do a cultural adaptive response. I'm not an anthropologist, but I did figure this out. My brother's an anthropologist. But so what was interesting to me is how that works. And so they were a whaling society, and the whales were their salmon, was their supermarket, their Costco, just like the buffalo was for the people in the Great Plains. So I'm just noticing and connecting the dots between how conditions change. And certainly a year and a half ago, the last presidential election, conditions did change, and it has changed the climate. And it is making a cultural shift. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about that in the context of the condition. The other thing I want to mention just very quickly is let's just be honest about the driving forces that animate the conditions for community climate and cultural changes requiring an adaptive response. Environmental degradation, economic uncertainty, rise of religious fundamentalism in concert with the rise of ultra-right politics, the rise of racism, and other forms of oppression and exclusion based on social identities. Is that correct? Does that seem familiar to you? Okay. Reflections on, so very quickly, this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the reflections on the pace of what I've been learning, this idea of slow death or deep change. And I'll go back to this in a little while. But just very quickly, listen to this litany of movement, of change and progress in adaptation to change that happens in the area of transportation. And then I'm going to use that as an analogy to talk about the opportunities and the challenges. Okay, so check this out. And Father Pat Ford, I don't know if some of you knew him. He was one of the AVPs when academic vice president, when I first came to Gonzaga. And him and I were talking about this. We used to have these kind of conversations. And I found some old notes, and this is why I'm going to talk about it right now. He said this, we said this, 1,800 years separated Julius Caesar and George Washington, yet the method and speed of transportation remain virtually the same. Horse, buggy, right? Okay, now check this out. Then witness what happens. 87 years after George Washington, Abraham Lincoln rode in a steam locomotive train to deliver the Gettysburg Address. 22 years after Lincoln's time on the train, the Wright brothers, out of their bicycle shop at Kill Devil's Hill, did what a mathematician by the name of Simon Newton said was impossible to do. They flew. 20 years after the Wright brothers, Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic Ocean. 22 years after Lindbergh's historical flight, Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier. And 24 years later, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. Today, we have space probes and other star systems, and I just recently learned that the Hubble Space Telescope recently identified the most distant star ever discovered, a hot blue star existing 4.4 billion years after the Big Bang. Whoa. Who needs drugs? I mean, hello? If that does not alter your consciousness, I don't know what will, right? What happened to the cultural progress of human rights? What would Martin Luther King say if he were here with us tonight? Would he say that it seems like Groundhog's Day? Why? Let's examine the challenge. Let's summon the wisdom of Carl Rogers when he says, "What you forget you always are, what you remember you can change." The challenge. Now, I'm going to go a little long here, but I need to say this. I want to read. Okay, so listen to what Corinne McLaughlin and Gordon Davidson said in Jacob Needleman's book. Do you know Jacob Needleman's work? We brought him to Gonzaga many years ago. He wrote a book called The American Soul, Rediscovering the Wisdom of the Founders. Listen to how they begin their discussion on the soul of America. In fact, I took an excerpt that I had written. I wrote this in 2001. I let my assistant pre-read my talk for tonight, and she said, "Wow, you wrote this in 17 years ago." Through the study of the aegis wisdoms of East and West, we have come to understand that each nation has a soul, the essence of its highest ideals. Just as each individual has both a self-centered personality and a wise, compassionate soul, so with nations. Most nations have come into being as a result of a group or an individual who articulated in some way a tiny spark of the spiritual soul of that nation. And we began to bring it in a sense of coherence and direction. For example, Gandhi did this for India, Nelson Mandela did this for South Africa. Just as individuals struggle with the process of personality integration, bringing the physical, the emotional, and mental components of their personality into a coordinated working whole, so too must a nation become an integrated personality before it can successfully invoke its soul. The immature personality of the United States was evident in the expression of manifest destiny and articulation of Jeffersonian democracy, a belief that all land across the continent was meant to belong to the U.S. and so could greedily appropriated without regard for tribal people. The soul of each nation holds the inner pattern of the nation's development and historical unfoldment. This includes the integration of all its ethnic and racial constituencies, understanding of national karmatic issues that need to be resolved, fulfillment of its highest purpose, and ultimately transcendence and identification with the community of nations. In the long sweeping evolution, the soul eventually illuminates and controls the personality of a nation, if not the nation will eventually destroy itself from within, as most self-centered nations have done over the centuries, as illustrated by ancient Rome. Freedom, here's my point. I finally got to it. Here's my point. They don't call us professors for nothing. We like to profess a lot. Freedom is the innermost signature of the American soul. Whether Republican or Democrat, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, Indian, Mexican, whatever, everything under the blue dome that's different. We are in a love affair with freedom, or as John Stuart Mill once said, absence of restraint. Don't rain on my parade. Freedom is the innermost signature of the American soul. In fact, freedom and equality are sacred principles. The motto on our great seal, E pluribus unum, out of the many one, or unity and diversity, reflects a central purpose of the soul of America. The great seal of this country is a soul symbol. What are some of the other obvious soul symbols of America? One place where you can see some of the symbols of the soul of America can be found in your wallet right now, the dollar bill. The great seal is on the dollar bill. Joseph Campbell believed that symbols are the psychological mechanism to transform energy and act as a bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. On one side of the great seal is the eagle, which is sacred in many cultures. It is the only bird that looks directly into the sun. The eagle is facing west towards the olive branch, symbol of peace, rather than towards the arrows of war. The number 13 is used 13 times on the Great Seal in the numbers of arrows and stars. It is the magical number of transformation, the 12 plus 1. 12 signs of the zodiac plus the sun. 12 knights of the round table plus King Arthur. Christianity, the 12 disciples plus Christ. And by the way, the eagle has 13 feathers. On the other side of the Great Seal, the all-seeing eye of God, as the missing capstone being placed above the four-sided pyramid, which symbolizes materialistic life. It is not already in place. It is gradually being brought down on the pyramid, symbolizing the work America has yet to accomplish. Carl Jung once said, I love this. Check this out. Carl Jung said this. He said, one does not become enlightened by imaginary figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Building a multicultural democracy will require America to confront and integrate its national shadow before the full power of its soul can flow into national life. Revolt from all control is one aspect of a nation's shadow reflected in extreme anti-government sentiments that swept the country and has been sweeping the country. Certainly the growth industry of hate talk shows, fanatical militias, can all be interpreted as symptoms of this revolt from all control. This is really a classic case of what psychologists call shadow projection, as those groups that would most like to force their views on others and control others are most fearful that the government is going to control them. Wow. That's the challenge. What spirit, what soul will we collaboratively create for this nation state, for our region and local communities? What will the spirit of our hive be to make honey for the inclusive many? Let me explain. Did you know that a queen bee has no role in the strategic decisions of the hive? For example, she has no voice in the decisions to move a new location, or for that matter, to do anything regarding change. The bees collectively respond to informative dances of the scouts, and then swarming off to a place they like best. The queen bee simply follows. What the queen bee does is she exudes a chemical substance that holds the system together. She is responsible for what has been called the spirit of the hive. Perhaps the most inner workings of a beehive can offer a simple metaphor for examining a way of proceeding in our pursuit for equality and social justice for everyone that is part of the human hive. It may take a large dose of another H word, hope. Hope embedded in our opportunity, which is the third aspect that I want to talk about. 15 years ago at the Spokane YWCA Women's Leadership Benefit Luncheon, I was fortunate to meet Maya Angelou. In fact, I did the opening prayer and then she spoke. I was like, Tony, I'm going to go first after her. I'm going to go after her, man. No way. So I went first and she went second. And she eloquently enunciated her opening keynote address by singing an old 19th century gospel song. The lyrics went something like this. When it looks like the sun wasn't going to shine no more, God put a rainbow in the clouds. In the worst of times, there's possibility of seeing hope. Listen to how Jonat Diaz describes the context for radical hope in these changing times. We have to keep fighting because otherwise there will be no future. All will be consumed. Those of us whose ancestors were owned and bred like animals know that future all too well because it is in part our past. And we know that by fighting against all odds that we had nothing, not even our real names, but transformed the universe. Our ancestors did this with very little, and we have more, must do the same. This is the joyous destiny of our people, to bury the ark of moral universe so deeply in justice that it will never be undone. The philosopher Jonathan Lear calls this type of hope radical hope. What makes this hope radical is it is directed towards a future goodness that transcends the current ability to understand what it is. Whoa. That's like Merlin saying, remember the future. Messing with the time thing, man. Critical hope is not so much something you have, but something you practice. It demands flexibility, openness, and what Lear describes as imaginative excellence. Radical hope is our best weapon against despair, even when despair seems justifiable. It makes the survival of the end of your world possible. Only radical hope can have imagined people like us into existence. I have a little note here right now at the point where it says, if time permits, offer... Can I have a few more minutes? Tony, where's Tony? Tony, where are you? Can I just, what, just five more minutes? 2? Okay, no, I don't, I mean, you know, okay, so I wrote my little note here, said, if time permits, offer the Westin Hotel Portland, Alaska flight story as an example of flexibility, openness, in the practice of radical hope. Or the Deer Park Napa story. Okay, so can I do one real quick? I'll microwave it, okay? Because I want to kind of, okay, so check this out. I know this is hard to believe, but I used to be a talking head will travel. I used to do a lot more public speaking than I do now. I don't do very much public speaking anymore. But back in the day, I used to do a lot of public speaking. And so this one instance, I was in the Westin Hotel, and I was going to be the speaker at a conference in the morning. And I flew in that afternoon and got to the hotel around 5 o'clock and checked in. And I was dressed up in a suit. In those days, I had braids. And so I checked in, and I went to the elevator, and 3 or 4 guys came in at the same time, and they smelled like fine scotch. They had been happy hour, and they were happy. We all got in the elevator, and all of a sudden, one of them looked at the other guy, and he said, I can't remember the guy's name, George or whatever. He said, George, you better watch what you have on top of your head. You might get scalped. And he's looking at me. And at first I thought I was having auditory hallucinations. I said, did he really say that? You know, and then finally I looked up and I said, what did you say? And then the other guy said something to the fact, don't get him riled, he's going to go on the warpath. And they went on and on like that, you know. So finally I looked at him and I said, you know, you want to talk to me, I'm standing right here. And then the other guy got kind of puffy, and I was younger in those days, and I got a little puffy. And so then we were getting into it. Well, I was saved by the bell because it was my floor, and ding, and the door's open, and I get my stuff, and I walk out the door, and I look back at him, and I exercise my vocabulary of 4-letter words. I'm yelling at them, they're yelling at me. I go like this, read between the lines. do that. I mean, you're yelling at me. And then the guy has the audacity, because I held the door a little bit, because I was getting really, I didn't care how many there were. I was just, and the guy goes, you don't like that. You listen to this. There's 3 or 4 of them wanted me. I got the door. He goes, if you don't let the door go, I'm going to call security. He's like, really? I laughed, Doors closed. And this is what happens when you hang out with Jesuits. There's some people that know a little about a lot. There's others that know a lot about a little. And the Jesuits are mess you up smart. They know a lot about a lot. And one of the things I love about them is the origin and meaning of words. And the word image, the lasting image of me yelling at them, and them yelling at me, in Greek, the word image means a moment's intuition into reality. Angry, white, racist white men, what do they think of me? Angry, rageful, Indian, Mexican, blah, blah, woof, woof, whatever. Next morning, I give the talk, get on an airplane, I'm going to Portland. What I didn't tell you is this is 1992, when the Rodney King verdict comes out. So I fly into Portland and I do my stuff there. I was a part of a board of Northwest Education Regional Laboratory, whatever it was, and I went into my meetings, and then I was going to the airport to come home. And I got one of those Horizon flights that originated in LA, goes to Portland, and Portland to Spokane, Boise. Back in those days, that's what. So the airplane was like 4 or 5 hours late. Everything was screwed up, and I was waiting. Finally, the airplane comes. Come to find out that LA was in riot. LA was burning. All the smoke, LAX and Ontario, all the area airports were delayed. So we finally got on the airplane, and I got sitting down, and some guy across the aisle, not reading an interesting book, and I'm hearing my stereotypes. He's suntanned, white guy, all white with gold neck, gold thing here, white pants, white socks, white shoes, white shirt. He was a white man. I mean, so, with gold, and I'm eavesdropping, and he's saying stuff like, yeah, those damn people are burning the city, and I could find out that he's a snowbird, and he spent the winter in Palm Springs, and now he's flying back to his home in Boise. I'm listening to all this stuff, right? And so finally he says something like this. He says, those people ought to go back where they came from. Whoa. Silence is endorsement. I know this. So I say, and where should you go back to? I mean, this is impulsive, behavior. And he, oh man. So we got into it. I got to shorten this up because I'm taking too much time. Okay, so then the flight attendant comes and gets between us. I mean, I wasn't going to be weird. I'm cool. I'm a lover. I'm a peacemaker. So she says, "Is everything okay?" And I say, "Yeah." So I sit down, and he goes on and on and on, and and I hear voices, and I'm not on Heldo-Cogentin or Stelazine or anything. I'm not but I see things and hear things, and all of a sudden I heard this voice in my head say something like, "Apologize to him." I said, "What?" And so for the flight from Portland to Spokane, I'm sitting there just listening to him and thinking about these voices in my head. And then I hear this song. I'm Mexican and Indian. My mother was from Zacatecas. I'm not going to go into that right now. But anyway, so biology and biography, that's an interesting story too. But so I thought to myself, I could hear this song my grandfather used to sing, my dad's dad. And I started singing it, and I started feeling pretty good. I felt pretty good. And he had a beautiful face. And I would see in my mind's eye, I could see his face. And it made me feel good. So then, when the airplane landed, he was going on to Boise, so he stayed on. And I got my overhead stuff. And I leaned, it's like, the store's like there. And I leaned over like this, and he went like this. And I was sincere, and I said, I'm sorry I yelled at you, and I apologize for being rude and disrespectful. I had no right to do that. But I told him, I said, I just hope one day that you can feel and hear what I felt and heard by your words. And I said, I'm sorry, I apologize. I said, hopefully one day you'll understand why we had this experience together. And I hope you have a good spring, and I hope you have, a good life, basically. So then I got my stuff, and he just had this frozen look on his face. And I walked, where the cattle drive in the first class at what they have curtains, And I turned around and I looked at him, and I just felt like this warm energy in my heart center, and I just looked at him and I just gave him love. Genuinely, I just thought, I listened to a Neil Young song the other day, and it was called "The Campaigner." And Neil Young, he says this. He says, "Even Richard Nixon had a soul." And the Jesuits believe all things come from God, And so I guess I did that, and he looked at me, and an image, a moment's intuition, reality. So contrast. Westin Hotel, elevator doors close. What do they think of me? What do I think of them? Airplane, the look. What is he going to think of me? What am I going to think of him? Let us have the courage to be who we are. To close the gap between rhetoric and reality, between principle and practice, is an act of courage and integrity, the integration of head, hands, and heart. My prayer tonight is that we all are given the courage to embody agape love, the spirit of our hive. In his book, Awareness, the Pearls and Opportunities of Reality by Anthony DeMello, the Jesuit, he says this. He says, "Rain falls on saints and sinners alike. Is it possible for a rose to say, 'I will give my fragrance to the good people who put their nose by me, and deny my beautiful fragrance to the bad people?' Does a light in this room say, 'I'm going to utilize my luminosity to those that sit underneath me that are good, and deny my light to those that are bad?' On a hot day in the middle of the great expanse, 120 degrees heat in Kenya, one lone tree out in the middle of nowhere, is that shade going to say from that tree, 'The ones that are good that sit under me, I will give them sanctuary and nourishment with my shade, and I will deny it to those that are bad or mean or not good'?" We know the answer, right? These are images of service born from the spirit of love. These are images which dignify difference, that include distinction in the emotional roller coaster ride of what it means to be human. So, I'm done almost. I have closing comments. So, when all things are said and done, what is most important when we reflect upon what happens between the bookends of life, the miracle of birth and the mystery of death? Earlier this month, a few weeks ago actually, within 24 hours, I experienced the compression of these two realities, the miracle of birth and the mystery of death, or the potential mystery of death. In less than 24 hours, I left maximum security death row in Chowchilla, California, to catch a flight back to Spokane with my wife, Victoria, after visiting her sister advocating for her release. And on Monday morning in Spokane at 3:30 a.m., my daughter, Grace, gave birth to my first grandchild, Logan Michael, who was born 2 months premature, and by the way, is doing very well at Sacred Heart. In fact, when I went to the... Thank you. Growth in the sense of human potential is not linear. Here again, when all things are said and done, what is most important to us? In the inclusive embrace and transcendent transformation of our differences and similarities that are held by the bookends of birth and death. Listen to what the Sufi master says, many of them, and I quote, "The nature of life is elusive and illusionary. Under a gain, a loss is hidden. Under a loss, a gain is hidden. And living in this world of illusion is very difficult for a man, for a woman to realize what is really good for them. However, I will argue that democracy and diversity are soulmates for freedom." Remember, the indelible mark of the soul signature and symbol of this country. We need to create space for both of them. We need to create space for equality and social justice for everybody. Notice how space is established in this room. 2 walls, that wall, this wall, and behind me. to create space. What happens when we omit or delete polarity? Someone once told me this. He said, Raymond, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls while others build windmills. Let's build windmills. I want to close with this, and I really promise I'm done, Tony. This is it. I'm running out of paper out here, man. Come on now. Then I'm going to really pull out my song set. Pass me that bottle and I'll sing you a real song. Okay, check this out. I really wish this, and this is the closing piece, and then I'm not going to say anything more. Symptoms of inner peace. And I wish this for everybody in the room right now. And that you go viral and becomes contagious. Be on the lookout for symptoms of inner peace. The hearts of a great many have already been exposed to inner peace. It is quite possible that people everywhere could come down with it in epidemic proportions. This could pose a serious threat to what has up to now been a fairly stable condition of conflict in the world. Some signs and symptoms of inner peace. A tendency to act and think spontaneously rather than on fear based on past experiences. An unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. A loss of interest in judging other people. A loss of interest in judging self. A loss of interest in interpreting the actions of others. A loss of interest in conflict. A loss of ability to worry. And this is a very serious symptom. Someone once told me that worry is like a rocking chair. It'll give you something to do, but it won't get you anywhere. Frequent overwhelming episodes of appreciation, contented feelings of connectedness with others in nature, frequent attacks of smiling, an increased tendency to let things happen rather than make them happen, go with the flow, an increased susceptibility to love extended by others as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend it. And then there's a warning at the very end of this, and it says this: if you have some or all the above symptoms, please be advised that your condition of inner peace may be so far advanced as not to be curable. If you are exposed to anyone exhibiting any of these symptoms, remain exposed only at your own risk. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. You honor my mother. You honor my ancestors. I am not up here by myself right now. There's whole legions of spirits with me right now and with you. In the spirit of our ancestors, may the blessings be. Let us continue this work. Let us not get worried. Let us not get tired. Let us not get burned out. Let us help each other do this work. It needs to be done. This is a critical point in this country, and you know that, and I know that. We feel that. But we have to go with what we're for, not what we're against. We have to reframe our strategies. Now I'm preaching. I better be quiet. Amen.